We are all guilty of enabling narcissistic people. Sometimes we are just too tired to try to be a communication coach or a fighter. We just need to get through the damn day. So we want the script so we can say it just the way they want it. So let's talk about the 5 things that happen when you call out a narcissist. Remember that calling out a narcissist is not only a pointless endeavor, it can actually be dangerous. Dangerous for yourself or for others that they're able to punish, because they can. I know why you want to call them out, but they don't care, right? If they were capable of hearing your feedback, then they would likely have enough self-reflective capacity to not do the terrible things they do in the first place, and then I guess they really wouldn't be narcissistic people, would they? So let's break down the 5 things that happen when you call out a narcissist. And as always, if you have more, please toss them in the comments section. The first thing that happens if you call them out is rage. This is obviously the most universal reaction. Calling these folks out as narcissists evokes shame in them, which then starts the whole cascade of rage and shame and acting out in passive aggression. You know the drill. Some people might call them out in the heat of the moment and in the midst of the frustration of the narcissistic relationship will call the narcissist out. But the rage that follows can be even more destabilizing, turning frustration into fear. And it may not be as simple or black and white as you calling them a narcissist. Narcissistic people have the internet too. And should you decide to deconstruct it for them and say, you know what, I don't think you have no empathy and you are so entitled and you're so arrogant, blah, 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 they're going to Google it all and see that all of it adds up to narcissism. Or they will take umbrage at being called out on those bad patterns, because actually narcissistic people do kind of know what they actually do know what nice people are supposed to look like. And even as they do their own terrible things that they do, they like to see themselves as wonderful. So they don't need you telling them that they're doing bad things. So when you call them out, either straight up as a narcissist or subtly as a person that lacks empathy, or even more subjective names like calling them a monster or evil, expect rage that can range from dangerous and terrifying to passive-aggressive and takes a frustrating situation and makes it worse. The second issue, the second fallout, I should say, that comes of calling them out is gaslighting. You all know what gaslighting is, a form of manipulation whereby a person's reality is denied, and it is the narcissistic person's ground game. If you are to call them out on narcissistic patterns, then the fallout is things like, well, that never happened, or actually you're the one who did that, or you're the one who said that, or you're being ridiculous, or you seem to have a significant mental illness if this is how you see it, and they'll go on and on. If you know what gaslighting is, it can help you be a bit more resistant to it, but again, you are engaging in a pointless endeavor of calling them out. But if it matters that much to you to do it, then be prepared to be gaslighted. The challenge here is that you will then start pulling out the text messages and emails and behavioral examples to make your case. They don't care. They aren't listening to you. The third thing that likely will happen if you call them out as a narcissist is you being accused of being the narcissist. This is sort of a riff on the gaslighting one, unless you actually do happen to be a narcissistic person as well. I don't know. There's lots of people, hopefully, that watch this. But remember, the narcissists, like I said, have the internet too. And so if you were to level the accusation against them, that they're the narcissist, then you can expect that they're going to come at you with the whole list of reasons why the various things that comprise narcissism actually apply to you. One of the major fallouts of narcissistic relationships is that the people in them often wonder if they themselves are the narcissist, despite that person who thinks they're narcissistic having empathy and not being egocentric and all the rest of it. But people in narcissistic relationships are so often told they're narcissistic, or may believe that if they set boundaries in this relationship that they're being selfish, and they think of themselves as narcissistic. So if you call them out and they hit you with this, you may be vulnerable to falling for it. But in a significant majority of cases where someone told me that they called out the narcissistic person, they were hit with the accusation that they, the other person, was narcissistic. The number 4 thing that's likely to happen if you call a narcissist out is blame shifting. Remember that it is very difficult for people with narcissistic personalities to take responsibility. So if they behave badly, they will blame other people and other situations and other circumstances, such as their childhood or their work day or their stress or the unfairness of the world or money or their mean coworkers or you or your children or their parents, anybody but themselves. And never will they take responsibility for their behavior. Oh, well, they'll say things like, you think I have anger issues? Maybe. I wouldn't be frustrated if I wasn't the only one around here who actually works and actually does something, and I still manage to do well despite working with a bunch of morons. And then that narcissistic person will go on and talk about having been abused by their parents, or having a crappy spouse, that would be you, or having all these ungrateful kids. So in that case, well, maybe they're not denying the anger, but after they go on their rant, everyone else is responsible for their terrifying anger. Everyone else but themselves. And finally, the narcissistic person's tried and true response to being called out, which is the silent treatment. This is more often a tool of the covert narcissist. The shame, rage spiral tends to set off more of the passive-aggressive brooding and figuring out how to get revenge rage rather than the screaming and yelling. If you call them a narcissist or on their narcissistic behavior patterns, you may initially get rage or gaslighting of or any of those other things, but then they'll go silent. Maybe they will prelude it and say, hey, well, I don't know why you want to talk to me. Who would ever want to talk to a narcissist? I'm just so terrible. And then silence. Sometimes for days, maybe weeks. I've even heard of months and years. People generally don't like receiving the silent treatment. It makes them uncomfortable. And it may even induce us to apologize for our own being abused. So a person rages at you because you pointed out their narcissistic patterns, and then they go silent, and then you apologize, which in essence is you apologizing for them raging at you. The silent treatment is abusive, and it allows them to maintain their self-victimization through silent rage. It is tense, and it is punitive. The key with the silent treatment is to not fall into the trauma-bonded pattern of wanting to fix it. I am sure I am missing some patterns, but step 1 is don't call them out, work on you instead. If you do call them out, you can anticipate any or all of these reactions. And you may not care about these reactions. As I say, maybe it feels worth it to call out their behavior, and that's for you to decide in your own situation. But I don't want you to maintain the fantasy that you can call out the narcissistic patterns in a narcissistic person without any fallout, or that by calling them out, it will result in any kind of meaningful, sustainable, or observable change. No excuses sort of falls under that larger topic of things like second chances. Any one of you watching these videos knows that part of the reason you got so deep into this mess in the narcissistic relationship you were in, whoever it was with, is because you kept giving second chances. And a big part of those second chances were the excuses you made for the narcissist. So part of this requires us to go backwards and think about one big issue. Where does narcissism come from? Any of you who've read my books and watched other videos, we know that narcissism comes from a mix of a little bit of a temperament, like people come into the world, some people are just born a little bit more grumpy and difficult, but that mixes with things that happen in childhood. And we know that people can become narcissistic through a variety of paths. Parents who spoiled them, parents who were emotionally unavailable, parents who neglected them, parents who abused them, having gone through trauma, having grown up in a traumatic situation or setting. All of those things can potentially contribute to the development and manifestation of adulthood narcissism. So if we go back on that, and if you think about, you know what, this person is quite selfish, self-absorbed, unempathic, entitled, superficial, etc., etc., etc. But you're like, he had a really hard childhood. Or like, God, his mom is so awful. That's what I mean by an excuse. Many times a person's history becomes an excuse, a sort of proverbial get out of jail free card on their current behavior. Now, while it might be compassionate to always account for a person's history, to understand how they may respond in a given situation. For example, you may meet someone and they've had a traumatic history in childhood or even in adulthood, and will say, you know what, because this really tough thing happened to me, it's hard for me to make a commitment. So I'm going to be taking this slow, and I hope you understand that. That's a very honest and vulnerable disclosure that somebody can work with. That's very different than a person who chronically invalidates you, verbally abuses you, gaslights you, manipulates you, lies to you, yells at you. And when you finally call them out on that, they'll say, oh, God, you got to give me a second chance. You know how it was. I grew up with such a rough dad. No. That's an explanation after the fact, a rationalization of the bad behavior that came first. This is not someone who sat with you and said, hey, you know what? I often have trouble communicating in a relationship because of how I was raised. Please catch me on that because I want to grow. That's not how it happens. When it's used as a rationalization, when their backstory, when their history is conveniently pulled out as an excuse for their bad behavior, this is a great chance for you to gracefully exit in a very compassionate way and say, I'm sorry that happened to them, not my problem. Because that's the key you've got to remember. You're not responsible for their history, and nothing you do can undo that history for them. So many people buy into the fairy tale myth that if I love this person enough, if I'm good enough to them, if I sit here and listen to them the way their parents didn't, then that will clean the slate and all of that bad stuff will go away and they'll fall into the warmth of my love and they'll get it. Kind of not how it goes. If they've already done that growth before they get to you, wonderful. Keep in mind that a toxic, difficult, traumatic early history does not doom a person to not being able to have healthy, loving adult relationships. I have worked with countless individuals who have had very traumatic histories and have gone on to deeply loving adult relationships. But that's because the person who experienced the trauma did the deep dive. They did the work to get to the core of it instead of taking it out on somebody else. So narcissists will often pull their sometimes really difficult histories out and almost weaponize it. Use it as an excuse so that in the midst of a heartfelt debate, when you're sharing your feelings, you're sharing your hurt, they'll pull that out. And in many ways, it sort of invalidates your experience because now you say, oh, he's playing the early childhood trauma card again. How am I supposed to say anything? Because now you feel guilty. It's a really inappropriate gambit to take in a relationship, and it needs to be a wake-up call. If you keep making excuses for somebody's inappropriate, mean, cruel, harsh, abusive behavior in a relationship, I can promise you one thing and one thing only. Their behavior is not going to change. It is so tempting to make excuses on the basis of a person's history. But a person who's really had a difficult life history will often take ownership of it on the front end and really commit themselves to getting it right and be open to communication from their partner or whoever's close to them about how to get it right. And this isn't just limited to intimate relationships. This could even happen with a parent. Your own parent, you might say to them, listen, you've been invalidating me my entire life. Please stop. And your parent will say, oh, that's all I know. Your grandmother or grandfather abused the heck out of me. The same thing. The fact is, the moment they became a parent, they needed to get their house in order, and they needed to work on their history and not make it your problem. So catch yourself. The best sort of rule of thumb when working with or being with or trying to love or trying to have a relationship with a narcissist is no excuses. As much as excuses may feel like a compassionate path to take, instead what it does is it informs you that this person may not have done the work and the growth they need to have a healthy relationship. Doesn't mean you have to walk away from the relationship, but it is a wake-up call that if you find yourself chronically making excuses for this person, the one thing you can be sure of, this relationship is going to go nowhere fast. Making excuses for narcissists is the reason many times these relationships can last 10, 20, 50, 60 years. Because if you make enough excuses, you construct an entirely new reality, and a reality that's probably not good for you. So good luck. Stop making those excuses. And you know what? I'd be curious to hear, what excuses have you made in your relationship with your narcissist? The comments help, because the fact is, everyone watching this, they read each other's comments. You're all learning from each other's comments. I'm getting amazing emails from people who are saying, you know what? Just reading the comments sections on these videos have created so much empathy for me because I know what other people are going through. So please know that the comments you put on these videos are helping a lot of other people. So please let us know, what kinds of excuses have you made for the narcissist in your life? I know you have done this before. I know you have. Let's say it's in the midst of a frustration with a toxic or difficult or high conflict or narcissistic person in your life. You do this after nothing you say is working. No matter what you try, nothing works. It always ends up with you getting it wrong, with you being manipulated, with you being gaslighted, or with you being raged at. What comes next? Out of sheer exasperation, you finally say, please just tell me. Please, I beg you, just tell me. Tell me what to say. Tell me how to say it. Tell me how to be, and I will do it. You want the arguments and the anger and all of it to end. You just can't figure it out. So you figure that you will just ask for the right answers to the test. Have you ever gotten to that point when you say, just tell me what to say? Drop a comment if you've ever gotten to this point. Now let's say you do this. The difficult person in your life will then say, I'm not doing that. It wouldn't be satisfying for me to know that you're reading a script. And at that point, you just want to put your head in your hands and cry. So you may be wondering, what the hell do they want? So let's break this down. This phrase that many people find themselves saying, actually, to me, it tells me they're probably in a narcissistic relationship. But this phrase, just tell me what to say, tell me how to say it, tell me what to do. Again, a surefire sign that someone is in a narcissistic, toxic, or antagonistic relationship. It is, in many ways, a manifestation of the expectation of mind reading that so many people with narcissistic personalities have. If you really take mind reading back to a very primal space, it's really a throwback to infancy, isn't it? The baby who doesn't know where they end and where their caregiver begins, the baby needs the caregiver or wants the caregiver to anticipate their needs for hunger or comfort or cold or warmth. And when that doesn't happen, the infant sort of panics, cries, and if all goes well, the infant is responded to quickly, and the infant is soothed. Over time, the infant turns into a toddler, who turns into a child, who slowly learns how to communicate their needs, initially with gestures, and then with words, and then hopefully those needs get met, and then into an adolescent and adult who can sometimes meet those needs themselves and otherwise learns to communicate them. That's the healthy path. But around infancy into around toddlerhood, that's where the child learns that other people can't read their mind. Listen, it's a fortuitous coincidence when everything lines up and someone does just sort of meet your needs. But we have language for a reason. And the child learns, I need to ask for what I need, and hopefully their environment meets that need. But alas, the narcissistic person is forever stuck in infancy. Read my mind. Do it the way I need. Say it the way I need. Be who I want, when I want, as I want. But, as is the hypocrisy of the narcissistic relationship, they will then, don't expect me to be consistent. Don't expect me to be there for you. Sometimes I will be, but usually I won't. That's how those relationships work. They resent that you cannot anticipate their needs. They're grandiose enough to think that people should anticipate their needs, and they are infantile enough to believe it can happen, and they are entitled enough to get mad when it doesn't happen. Obviously, this idea that somebody could read your mind and say things to you exactly the way you want is a deeply unreasonable and frankly unhealthy expectation in a relationship. This idea that, again, that you'd be able to read their mind or get it right and say it and do it and be it exactly as they want at any given moment. Now, another key dynamic of the narcissistic relationship, baiting, also complicates this. Narcissistic people always want the fight. So you couldn't get it right if you try. Most healthy people don't want a fight. Most narcissistic people do. So there's no right way at those times. All roads lead to the fight. The victimized element that characterizes most narcissism means that they are looking for the data to support their hypothesis that they are always going to be let down, because no matter what you do, they feel let down. Now remember that narcissistic people, all of them, they lack self-reflective capacity, and they lack insight into the motivations for their own behavior. Basically, they do not understand their own why. So they don't understand their need for mind reading. They don't understand their need pretty much for anything, but they go around and demand it. They walk around the world posturing as though they are well put together people. They think that they're functioning well in the world. But the contrast between the two, the utter lack of insight, but the acting as though they do have insight, means that the people who are closest to them are chronically frustrated. Yes, they want you to read their minds. Yes, their conscious mind recognizes it is not possible. No, they do not understand why they need you to read their mind. And because they lack insight and empathy, they get angry because the inadequacy in them gets activated. They know that they can't regulate themselves. And the more stressed and disappointed and frustrated and abandoned they feel, the more they expect people to read their minds. And you know, when it gets to this point, you know the rest of the story. So let's play this out. Over time, you get exhausted at not being able to communicate with your narcissistic partner because you don't want the fight. You literally wish they would hand you a script so you can say it just the way they want it, just so you can appease them. Keep in mind that this is how everyone deals with them. We are all guilty of enabling narcissistic people. Sometimes we are just too tired to try to be a communication coach or a fighter. We just need to get through the damn day. So we want the script so we can say it just the way they want it. Your conversations always end up with them being disappointed, with them always feeling let down, with them always feeling like you aren't doing it right, and then lashing out at you. You keep shifting strategies. And just as an FYI, that constant strategy shifting is a trauma bonded state. You keep chasing the right way to do things, but there is no right way. And in trying to stay alive in these relationships, you keep trying new things to try to keep it work. But the problem is that they want different things at different times, and it can be impossible to anticipate their constantly shifting needs. Over time, you may seem more strained and anxious in your communication, and no surprise, they get annoyed about that too. They get annoyed that you are so tense and that you are so wide-eyed. Obviously you are, because you're constantly walking on eggshells and you don't know what's going to set them off. So does this happen to you in your narcissistic relationships? Please drop a comment and let me know of a time when you just didn't know what else you could do to make it right. It's sort of a trick question because there's nothing you could do. I understand exactly why you want them to tell you what they want you to say. You figure if someone just gives you the answer key, then you can get an A on the test. But remember, they don't like that either. And that to me is a really fascinating part of narcissism and related personality styles. They don't like that people have to walk on eggshells around them and be solicitous and be oh so careful around them. Believe it or not, narcissistic people like to think of themselves as chill and easygoing when they are not. They don't like that they have to be handled. It brings up lots of shame in them. They just feel entitled to people doing things the way they want and being able to read their minds. So you asking for a cheat sheet on how to talk with them, that's not going to work for them. It is so maddening because it's basically a maze with no way out. For people who stay in these relationships or who opt not to leave these relationships or cannot leave these relationships, this wishing for a script for them to tell you what to say, it's a painful cycle. And one I actually really hope to end just by this video because it's never going to work for you to ask for it. Remember, what is the central or one of the central mantras of the narcissistic relationship? You can't win. You can't. You can't ask for a script. You can't even figure out how to say it because even they don't know the right answer. Obviously, you can't be a mind reader, but goodness knows that you've tried. So the entire relationship is a series of guesses. And some days you get lucky and you get it right. And more days than not, you don't get it right because you can't always in life predict whether the coin is going to end up landing heads or tails. In fact, your odds of guessing a coin toss are better, since what are the odds of guessing a coin toss? 50-50. The odds of you getting it right with somebody who's narcissistic are probably lower than that. Life with a narcissistic person is like living in a cruel casino, where some days you may come out ahead, but on more days than not only are you not going to win, you find out that the games are rigged. So you can think this through inside. This idea, oh, I wish they'd just tell me what to say. Just tell me what to say. But be aware that the moment you feel the need to say this out loud to someone, just tell me what to say, tell me how to say it, tell me who to be, remember that you are now managing a toxic, difficult, and very likely a narcissistic relationship. If you say it, that you wish they would tell you what to say, they're only going to get more angry at you. And you will then have to slide instead into the thickets of radical acceptance. This is what it is. This relationship's not going to change. It's not your fault. And as long as you're in this relationship, this is it. If you can find that way to radical acceptance, and I'm not saying it feels good, But if you can, you will be less surprised, perhaps less disappointed on the daily. Though I can't make the argument that you will be less exhausted or less mentally fatigued. These relationships are upsetting. That's that. Let's talk about that difference between not personalizing what the narcissist says and then not taking it personally. A lot of people have found this distinction to be very sort of confusing, and they're saying, golly, this certainly feels personal to me. And in fact, there was one email in particular I got about it. I'm like, this person was actually not happy about it. So I thought, let me break this one down. So this is a tough one. And it's one that more than a few people have asked about, and even clients I've worked with have asked about this. And I see now and I understand the confusion. So part of this video is also to sort of break through that confusion. So many of you know, as I give guidelines for how to cope with narcissism, narcissists, and narcissistic abuse, is to not personalize their behavior, okay? But many people say to me, dude, how the hell am I not supposed to make this personal? This person is gaslighting me, insulting me, criticizing me, undermining me, basically dehumanizing me. It's freaking personal, okay? Yes, it is personal, but let's take a step back. In most cases, I know it doesn't seem like this to you, but they actually are sort of equal opportunity offenders. They do tend to be dismissive of just about everyone, contemptuous of just about everyone, gaslight just about everyone. You, the coffee shop clerk, family members, colleagues, but you're going to get it worse. The closer you are into the narcissist's orbit, the worse it's going to be, especially if they're a partner. And then you say, no, Dr. Ramani, they are two-faced. They are nice to their friends. They're nice to that jerky guy they work with. They're nice to their grandiose business partner. They're nice to their father who gives them money. Oh no, I've seen them be nice. So let's take a look. Let's break this down a little bit. Let's take a look at those relationships where your narcissist is nice. You're right. They can be two-faced. They are two-faced. Narcissists will put their best face on and bring narcissistic supply to people they value or admire. Those are often people with money, with power, people they deem as somehow virtuous or aspirational. And it can be rare for them to find these people that they think so highly of because they themselves are so jealous and competitive of other people who have the things they want. But when narcissists find people that they value, and maybe they value these people because those other people, these people with the power and the money, make promises they want to hear, bring some other value added. They might be a great wingman or a great wingwoman. They may be giving them money. The narcissist may be getting power or recognition simply by having this relationship for this person. And then the narcissist might actually become really good at being narcissist enablers for bigger narcissists. It's like that diagram where the big fish eats the smaller fish. So that is why your narcissist can seem two-faced, and it's important to this video to understand that. And narcissists are sprinters, which is why they have an uncanny ability to fake it for a few hours and seem charismatic and charming for one evening, during one event, during one family reunion. But behind closed doors, you get the pleasure of experiencing the very worst of them. It's as though they get worn out from being charming with other people. They need supply. Narcissists need supply, so they need to be charming to get it. They have you locked down, so they don't need to do that with you anymore. So let's go back to this issue of personalizing. I had to lay out that context. So, like you said, they're two-faced. They have those special people they're so nice to. Let's say one of those special people that they like so much lets them down. Or someone at a party that they're being so charming and charisma-ing at insults them or slights them in some way. Just sit back and watch then. That other person who seemed to be getting the best of your narcissist is very quickly going to see the worst of them. Again, equal opportunity offenders. They're going to go at anyone who gets at their insecurity. So let's go back to the original premise. This is what this video is supposed to be about. Not taking it personally versus personalizing it. When we talk about taking something personally, it's an acknowledgement that their behavior hurts. And taking it personally when a narcissist is abusing you absolutely makes sense. If someone gaslights you, it's abusive. If someone invalidates you, it hurts. You feel something. That's absolutely personal. I get that. But here's what's interesting. Their behavior is actually not about you. You're like a piece of furniture to them. It's really about their fragility, their lack of empathy, their incapacity for intimacy, and their incapacity for closeness. When I say don't personalize it, what I'm trying to say is it's not about you, although it affected you. It's like if it rains one day, the rain isn't about you, even if it ruined your party. This is an important distinction. I never want anyone to feel, ever in these videos or in my work, as though I or anyone else is telling them to not feel. Obviously, you have to feel. Your feelings are always valid. You feel when someone treats you badly. You feel anxious, angry, hurt, a whole host of feelings. When I'm giving the guidance to not personalize it, I'm trying to give you a tool to disempower the narcissist's words. If you think someone really is calling you out on your shortcoming or failing, or even something that's not really your failing, it feels awful. But if they're calling you out on something because of the voices in their head, that's a very different example. So bear with me while I use sort of two examples to try to teach this. The first example is going to be a bit of an exaggeration to make my point. You're walking down the street in a city. A person you encounter is on the sidewalk, disheveled, unkempt, and clearly doesn't have a consistent home. Next to them are their strewn belongings, all sort of in and out of a shopping cart. They start coming up to you and say, "You're ugly. You're as ugly as a Martian. I know you're ugly inside and you're inside and out ugly because you were sent to get me. Go away, you ugly person. You're an ugly Martian. You stay away from me." Would you personalize that? Probably not. You may assume this unfortunate person is living with a severe mental illness. You may walk away quickly. You may even feel uncomfortable, fearful, or even angry. All feelings. It would feel personal because it was targeted at you in that moment, but you wouldn't personalize it. You wouldn't believe you're an ugly person from Mars, right? Would you? This example obviously is an easy one to get your head around because the commenter is clearly mentally ill and you don't know them. There's nothing other than them saying terrible things to you, but you wouldn't personalize it. You might even barely take it personally. So let me try another example. A hypersensitive narcissist in your midst gets snippy with you because you shared your feelings about a situation that had just unfolded between the two of you. You share your feelings appropriately. Perhaps you say to this narcissistic person, "You know, I feel sad. I'm sad that we just haven't been doing the basic things that people do in a relationship together. And on top of that, the bulk of the workload in this household is falling on me. I'd love it if we could share it a little bit, like divvy it up so we could do things together." And then they respond, "Oh my God, ugh, you are being ridiculous. Will you stop being so sensitive? Can't you see? I have deadlines. Do you really think that cleaning out the garage is spending quality time together? Good Lord, you sound like you're crazy. Get some help. If something as small as, oh, we don't spend time cleaning the garage together makes you sad, what about then? All you did in that scenario was share a feeling. That's it. And in fact, you wanted time with them. That's it. And then you got a soliloquy on how you are ridiculous and potentially mentally ill. So can you apply the same rubric here as you did when you were called a Martian? That this is the narcissist's inability. Can you view it through the lens that this is the narcissist's inability to process any kind of emotion? So they gaslight you and minimize you. Your feeling is valid. Their response is what's abusive. You aren't mentally ill for wanting to express a feeling and a desire for a connection. If you can view it from that perspective, then you are not personalizing it, even though it feels personal. You can then place the bad communication into the narcissist. And yes, there's nothing you can do. No words you can say to stop their gaslighting. I know it feels helpless, but it's true. All you can do, though, is take your power back by recognizing that their dismissiveness and is unacceptable, frankly, and your reality is valid. Dealing with narcissists is an exhausting way to live. That's the bottom line. Anyone's going to acknowledge that. And the more you've got, the more exhausting it is. Constantly reminding yourself to not personalize something that feels personal is a very tough distinction to make in the moment. But whether you do it in the moment or in a few minutes, it's important to make. Because if you do not have the luxury of no contact or getting distance or really good boundaries, you need to find a way to stay sane. So yeah, your life with a narcissist is a series of dismissive, invalidating, minimizing, even dehumanizing moments. Daily, hourly, and it is exhausting, and yeah, it is definitely taking a toll on your health. But when you can create some kind of mental distance, even if you can't create physical distance, that's important. You need to recognize you can't change them. Stop wasting your time on arguments that go nowhere, and spend that time cultivating and owning your reality. At a minimum, at least, you can get some much needed perspective if you do that. And of course, it becomes very, very important as part of your healing to establish healthy relationships, healthy friendships, collegial and community relationships that go back and forth, that are mutual. Anything that gives you an antidote to the black hole one-sidedness of a narcissistic relationship. So I'm asking you to do something that feels impossible, but it's very possible. I'm asking you to stop personalizing the personal. Give it a shot. It's my hope that this video explains the difference. And even as I sat down and thought about this video, I'm like, I'm actually asking them to do the impossible. And even as you're not personalizing, when something's personal, it does take a toll on you. It absolutely takes a toll on you, okay? So you need to give yourself a moment at those times, whatever your healing ritual is, and I'm going to be having a video coming out on healing rituals in the next few weeks, but this idea of if something feels personal, it is exhausting. It is awful to have your reality doubted. It's awful to have someone make fun of you. However, when you can say, yeah, this doesn't feel good, just like, I don't know, cold, blustery rain doesn't necessarily feel good. You can also recognize that I don't need to personalize this. The rain isn't coming from me. And while the narcissist's words feel cold and harsh and awful, they do this to everyone to protect their fragile sense of self. If you can catch yourself in the moment and do that, you will actually be amazed at how strong you feel in those moments. It takes a lot of practice. Trust me, even personally, this is a skill I've been honing for years. And when you get it right, and it's a little bit easier when the setting's not as personal, like at work, when I've done it, I'm like, I'm feeling mighty strong right now. And this used to be a person and a situation that would get me worked up. It's a lot harder when it's a family situation or a relationship situation, but I swear you can get there. You may not get it right every time. If an argument's really, really personal, really cutting to the core of things that are core issues and core wounds for you, this distinction I'm making here doesn't always work. But if you can get it right a significant chunk of the time and really understand this personal distinction, you'd be surprised at how much more it makes these relationships endurable. So as always, thanks again for tuning in. I hope I made this clear. Let me know if I did. As always, these comments become very important to all of us. Give me a like if you liked it. If you didn't, I get it. And then also hit that notification bell and we'll let you know every time we put out new content. Bye.